Hi everyone, my name is Adrian Barajas and I'm with the Hispanic Googler Network, and we're honored today to have Jorge Zavala, CEO of TechBA, business accelerator from bringing companies from Mexico to the US. He's a serial entrepreneur, engineer, and he's going to tell us about his experiences in Mexico and bringing companies here. So without further ado, Jorge Zavala.
Yes, we have a good quorum, that's good. Okay, well, welcome to all of you, and I am very pleased to be in this event, be part of the Googlers team and helping all the Hispanic community. I'm going to talk about the talk is going to be divided in three parts. The first part is about my history, how I did some technology business and how life was in Mexico. Then I'm going to explain a little bit about the program that we are building here in the Silicon Valley and all around the world with the government of Mexico. And at the end, invite you to be part of this active process to be in that sense. Really, my life has been a very interesting life. I cannot complain. I born in Mexico City and got into the engineering school in La Salle University, where I really learned a lot of things in how to develop technology. At that time, microprocessors was just coming into the arena. For a lot of you, maybe you never listen about the 4004, 4040, 8008 processors, and was the very earliest Intel processors. And we were playing at that time in the university. We were the very first university in Mexico that started to do these kind of things. And it was very interesting because at that time we learned how to use technology for new things. I'm going to describe a little bit which one were that ones. Then I did my master's degree in Canada. I jumped from Mexico City to Waterloo, Ontario, where I was very pleased to learn a lot of things and switch between engineering environment to mathematics. That for a lot of people here in Google, maybe is not a big deal. When you are an engineer and move into mathematics, that is a very, very hard part. Because it's usually the engineers were all the time thinking in how to build things. The mathematicians are people that try to prove that the things work. Once they prove it, nobody cares. And that's a big challenge. Doing it another way, maybe from mathematician to engineer could be easier, because doing things is more easy than really having the abstraction and how to build things. And that was a very challenging for me. From them, I can define now as a polymaker without any specialty. I have been doing a lot of things I'm going to explain, moving from engineering to research to doing entrepreneur. I did 7 companies in Mexico, and then I moved into the venture capital environment, something that for everybody here in the US is quite, and here in the Silicon Valley is quite normal. In Mexico, that was an unknown word. What means venture capitalist is something that not too many people knew it. From that point, I moved and I am doing really now a business development. That is my current passion, a lot of things that I am doing very much in how to manage the process of creating an idea and getting that into the market. From that point, when I was in the university, that was quite interesting, my life in the university. I was not really a student. I was really a problem within the students, within the university. Because I got in the second semester, in the second quarter, I got to work within the university, and I started to develop a research group as a student. That was a fantastic experience. Really was a unique. The university, La Salle University, was a young university. The electronics was brand new. We were the first generation of people in the engineering stuff. And from that point was very interesting because we start to develop the research capability with the same students, not with professors. And that opened a lot of doors and changed really the mindset in how you develop technology. Because usually when you go to the school, you expect that the people in the school show you how to do things. And usually, and that's one of the big issues that I see today in the education, the traditional way of doing training or doing teaching is getting behind at the speed that the technology is moving. And that is something that at that time, we did it in about 30 years ago, that was the students were taking heed of where they want to go. And for that reason, I say that we were a pain for the university. But it was interesting because it was a pain that the top level of the university liked it. The dean of the university enjoyed that, and they were very pleased every time that we got into the dean office and asked for resources to do new things. He was the very first guy and say, hey, take it. And from where? And we go to the dean of the engineering school and say, no way. And you go into the head of the departments, and they were very much the enemy because we were taking the resources for them to create the very first application. And the very first application that I built was first using microprocessors to do data acquisition systems. How you are able to control lab equipment to do research in the university. We were getting into the health and medicine school, and medical school, and we start using the technology microprocessors to do the sampling of things that we're doing all day long, where students taking measurements every hour, and they were really complaining because they need to do a lot of sampling every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we got and put some devices. That device is exactly the same device. Later on, I showed that to the electrical utility in Mexico, and they say, hey, we can use the same device to do the fully automatic control system in how to generate energy in Mexico. And that was a very interesting experience because from the lab, we became into the real world. We put that kind of systems. We built a technology that at that time was unique in the world. We were the very first place in the world that used microprocessor-based, fully automated data acquisition systems for electrical utilities. That was in 1981. 1976, sorry, 1976. That was really just appearing the microprocessors. Apple II was on the rise, was not yet IBM and things like that. Nobody knew about that. It was not yet in the mindset of a lot of people. And we use it, we compete worldwide in a contest to get a bit of how to do the full automation with a backed by a research institute in Mexico. They say, okay, we back it, we do it. We created the equipment, and 3 years later was in production in Mexico. And we won the international bid how to do that kind of things. At that time, we learned a lot because it was not just doing the idea and keeping that into some place. We did the idea, we created the prototype, we tested in the very, very hard conditions. There is a place, there are two very bad places in Mexico that are Mexicali. If you ever been there, right on the border, is the worst place for weather side temperature, high salinity, big ranges of temperature in day and night. And if you want to test an equipment for fulfill any kind of possibilities, that's the best place. We were lucky. The electrical utility said, well, that's too bad. We have a second one. And they sent us to a second place that was a little bit more friendly for doing the test. We did that, and the product 3 years later than the very first test was on production in Mexico and was used for 30 years in doing the full automation of the generation of electrical around the country. Mexico has something that is very different from the US. Mexico has just one generation company, and all the national system is fully integrated. You generate energy in Tijuana, in the top part of Mexico, or in Cancun, that is in the other extreme, and the energy can be distributed all around the country. It's just one network of electricity. It's not in the US, and there is several networks in that direction. And in that sense, we did a lot of things. And that time, really, I faced my first existential crisis in life. We go to do something new, or we went to doing something in the same approach. At that time, to compete as a competitive advantage, we decided to move from electronic circuits and the traditional hardware systems and use a microprocessor-based system that nobody else was using before. And we survived and was good. Then something happens very interesting. That was back within a research center in Mexico. The research center, by obvious reasons, was not focusing how to do manufacturing, how to do technology, applied technology. And we got the rights of use all that technology and move and create a company that was a private-owned company. At that time, I was not yet aware about what means entrepreneurship, and somebody else took the risk. I was just an engineer in there. And we went there, and we started using the same kind of technology, the same approaches. At the research center, we took 75 people. The research center at that time was 1,500 people. We took 75 people from the research center, and we hired another 75 people from the outside, and create a new company that born with 3 large projects. That was how to do simulation, how to do sugarcane automation, and how to do flight simulators. If I knew today, at that time, the things that I learned here, we never dared to do these kind of things because we were talking about 3 different markets, 3 different approaches, and that's the Mexican style. We do everything. We are a polymakers with a non-specialty. That's a brand name for Mexican people. We are very good to do a lot of things, but we hardly focus into one part. And that time, we made that mistake. That company did a fantastic job because we were able to create a chopper simulator that runs fine. We created a plant simulator that was used for the subway, how to train operators for the subway, like the BTA, not the BTA, but the BART. And that was a very good thing. And the tier one was the project I was involved with. I was a system architect there. Is we create a software application that was able to create the sugarcane production fully automatic, but for the first time in the world. Where you have a sugarcane production, is usually a lot of process, very manual. And one of the very manual processes when they take the people take with their hands the sugar production and say, well, you need to cook it a little bit, add pressure or reduce some kind of ingredients in there, increase the temperature, in order that you create a way to produce the crystallization of the sugar. We did it fully automatic with a tremendous advantage, and we reduce the amount of energy, what is the biggest cost for sugarcane, and we create a very high quality sugar. That was my second existential crisis because that company was owned by an engineering company. And the day that we finished the project, I talked to the president of the company and the CIO and say, hey, you know that we have a tremendous set of products here that can be done worldwide production. And the guy said, we're an engineering company, we don't care to do products. At that time, I resigned of the company and decided to be my entrepreneur life. Because I really was pissed off, because the effort that was done was 3 breakthroughs, very well done, that never was used again. We produced it, we installed the systems worked for several years until they die for obsolescence, and that's it. In that sense, I decided to move from the engineering side and move into my own companies. And the very first company, we decided and we cannot go to automate again the electrical utilities because it was already a market already covered, and where we can use the same technology. And that, at that time, I learned one thing that is quite important for the engineering. When you do something good, how you reuse that something into a new thing once, again, and again, and again. And we use the same technology that we were producing, was never patented, was never copyrighted. That means was complete free, available. And we reuse it. And what's very interesting because at the same time, 3 people in the same original team of the electrical utilities development, we have the same idea. And from friends, we became to be competitors. Each one of us decided to open their own company, and we start fighting for how to do water systems automation. And water system automation, I guess, is one of the business, and even today is quite interesting because the problem of water is getting more and more complex instead of less and less solved. At that time, we started doing the competition. In that sense, we won one of the big contracts that my company at that time won was how to manage the 1,100 wheel systems to extract water of Mexico City, to complement the water needed from the rivers and other places to feed the water systems in Mexico City. And that was a fantastic job. The company still is alive. I sold that company about 10 years ago, at the end of before the 2000 year, when I found and was interesting to be going into another kind of companies. And I decided and I need money to start a new venture because the internet was not yet on the corner. Multimedia appears to be there. And we started to using multimedia as a tool to do the development of medical people. How to train people in the medical environment was very complex. We created that company. That company really was not a very successful company. We did a very good projects, but the company just was a surviving company. One of the days, I decided, and I didn't like that, internet appears on the market, and I decide to create my latest of the companies. The other 7 companies were within these companies, branches, spin-offs, and things like that. And Kiven became to be in the 2000, in the 1998, became to be one of the very first internet companies in Latin America. We learned how to build a website. Digital equipment at that time exist, first and all. And we won the contracts for doing the website for them. Then that company became compact. Then some company that you may know that is called Microsoft was starting to reach through internet the market in Latin America, and we won the contract to be the official outsourcer for all applications, websites, and marketing productions for Latin America. That was a very, very high interesting company, Kiven. We start doing that. We found that doing the same kind of things to other companies could be good. And well, what was at that time a similar size company that could be our customer, HP, is one of the largest, and today is the largest, but at that time was not the largest computers. We won the same kind of contract with Latin America, and we start doing the outsourcing, and that became, once again, a very interesting learning process. Having a service company is good to be survival, but it's very hard to really grow the company into and generate wealth. At that time, we decide, well, why we don't move from outsourcing company to tool manufacturers or tool producers. And we switch on the fly, something that was a tremendous experience. We were the best suppliers for HP and Microsoft. At that time, that opens the door to any company that was thinking to decide a system related to internet. Say, hey, you have the best credentials for doing systems for any of the large companies in Mexico, Latin America, everywhere. And we started to do a switch from, instead of selling outsourcing, we're selling the tools for doing the full automation of content management, e-commerce, and knowledge management. Everything integrated. That was a very interesting, the best example that we had at that time. We were the very first people that created the Yellow Pages. About the same time that Paul Graham was doing here with Yahoo, the concept of the Yahoo stores. At that time, I learned something that is very interesting. When a big company is a monopoly, you lose the sight and the desire to grow and keep going. We built a technology that is still today, that was used for Yellow Pages, was a full system for how to automate companies, not was really a Yellow Pages. They never use it. They never learn how to really take advantage of how to use it. And the best example is, well, Yahoo took part of the business in Mexico of the Yellow Pages. Now Google, what I can tell you is you know the history. You have much better information than any of the Yellow Pages in Latin America. And that is a tremendous thing. That is a very high opportunity. From that experience, I decided suddenly one day when the Argentine government, we were trying to grow first and before the Argentine case, we decided Kiven, say, well, was the largest and the more solid e-commerce and content manager company in Latin America. Why we don't move from looking into the south, looking into the north? We decided to do that. We became here to San Francisco. We found that the resources to open a new company in the US was not a trivial kind of quantity. That was much before, in 1999, before the dot-com bubble. And we tried to get into the US, doing an alliance and get a venture capital resources. We interviewed 37 venture capitalists. We didn't know how to do that kind of things, how to get money from a venture capital. So it was a learning experience, really. And at the very last moment, we decided, okay, we make a joint venture with another company, get resources for one of these 37 companies, 37 venture capitals, and open an office here in the US. I came here in February of 2001. When was the .com? Was 2000, 2001? Was 2000, I guess. Was 1 month before the .com bubble burst. We came here, and when we came here, we start learning about that. We have a disagreement, my other partners and us, and say, hey, why we don't put that on hold for a week and we decide that? And we were the most lucky people in that time, because at that time, that week was when the burst bubble. We decided not to go. This company lost a tremendous amount of money, and we didn't went into the environment. The company keep going. Kiven was going well. At that time, we were about 200 people. We were selling about $7 million. It was a rational company. And something that we were very confident, say, hey, we can switch the model. We were moving into tools. We were getting resources in how to move into tools. When something that we never believed that was going to happen, the government of Argentina make a devaluation. And say, hey, what happened? You were in Mexico. Who cares? Well, that was the critical thing. That the government did a devaluation that was about a third of the amount of money. The value of the capability of Argentina took tremendous interest for a lot of the largest companies. We were working only with very large companies, and they decided to move all the outsourcing capabilities to Argentina. They were able to buy the same kind of resources for the third of the money than we were paying. That day, really was I recall that my first meeting with HP was, my only meeting with HP was on Thursday. And I came back to my office, called to my lawyer and say, hey, what is the fastest way that you can close a company? I say, it could take for a month. Sorry, you have 1 day. I took a very, very drastic decision. On Friday, I got the board of directors saying the company is closed on Monday. Monday was Holy Week in Mexico, Easter time. And saying, was no way to convince me that moving to another way. It was a tremendous bad time to sell a company. And we decided to do it. We closed the company on Monday. Next Monday, the 150 people that was working with us was working with my competitors. All my competitors were very happy that we closed it because they got a very good talent. And I decided to move into venture capital decision. And that was when we got into Visionaria. Visionaria was one of the very early venture capital ideas in Mexico. Was created by a guy that used to be the VP of Latin America for Microsoft. He was looking he left Microsoft the same day that I closed the company and say, hey, I want to try it. Venture capital was not ready in Mexico to be gone there. And the reason why was the complete different reason than we expected. Everybody said the problem was no money available to do venture capital. And the reason was, and you know here, is to be part of a venture-backed company, you need to have a very, very clear idea where you go, have a very high value, the money, how to manage, and a team that need to know a lot of things that we didn't found very often in Mexican companies. At that time, we were doing that kind of approach. We decided to go, instead of open really a venture capital, we decided to go into a business development process. We help a lot of companies. At that time, the government of Mexico, I present the idea of how to do business development to the government of Mexico. And the government of Mexico say, oh, that's a neat idea, but you are talking to help 5 or 10 companies with $50 million as an initial venture capital. Say, well, if you manage 5 companies, that's going to be good enough. And the government say, the Minister of Economy, how you can do that to 1,000 or 100,000 companies in a 10-year period? That's no way. We have a very good discussions, and that became to be TechBA. In that discussions, the government say, hey, you need to help not a few companies, is you need to go for hundreds of companies. We create a new business development process, that process that we has been going for 5 years. And it's a dream, it's still been a dream, then we need to go to find how to get these companies into an IPO. So far, Mexican people, non-Mexican companies, we have found just one Mexican company, one Mexican person that has gone to the full process of being a founder and get into a NASDAQ. That's something that we are looking how really to fulfill. What I learned in that stages. First of all, I learned really to work all around the 360 degrees of a company. From how you create ideas, how you put that on the market, how you do marketing, how you get resources, and you find something that is very interesting. You here as a part of a team, you maybe are a good executive. An executive is a person that is able to manage the resources that somebody put you. The entrepreneur is the guy that is able to create value without any resources. That's the big challenge that entrepreneurs has. And that's a very typical, and I don't know how many of you has been talking to people that are into the entrepreneur environment, and they put a little bit of the credit card, then they found somebody that helps a little bit to get into the next stage with an angel investment, and from that angel investment, how to move into create a big company. That process is quite fantastic. And in that time, I learned, well, 30 years or more, learning how to do that full process could be very interesting, taking the challenge that the government of Mexico asked me to be doing. And I really, in some way, is the organization, we sometimes joke that it's Don Quixote, is more into the side of philanthropy than into the side of business. But we hope that it's going to change, and the things are going very well. TechBA was created with the very big support of the Minister of Economy that has been gone a tremendous alliance, and is run by a non-profit organization that is the U.S.-Mexico Foundation for Science. And the idea here is how we focus in helping any idea that are in Mexico becomes a good business. Provide them a fast ecosystem to develop commercial capabilities in the U.S. At the beginning, we started with the NAFTA agreement. And in that sense, we started with an office here in Silicon Valley in 2005, almost 5 years now. Then we decided to open the next office in Austin, Texas, within a university. And we learned something that was quite interesting in that sense. Because here you come and learn the environment of entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurship is really every place. It's not a single event that you don't get there and you find people that are seeking how to create the next Google. The dream is here, the example, and I am very proud. I don't know if the people that works here in Google, then one of the Mexican people was very early in the stage of creating Google. Is when Page and Fries were students in Stanford. His professor was Hector Garcia Molina, and he's a Mexican guy, a very well-known guy in the academics. And he was one of the guys that was starting to discuss about searching and how to create all these things and organize the information of the world. And in that time, when we create in the office in Austin, we went to a university, learning how the entrepreneurship works into this environment and compare how is developed in a university is a complete different thing. Then we decided to open in Montreal because the NAFTA agreement was covering 3 countries. The Canadian people say, hey, why you don't consider to be here? And really, we didn't think about that. And they invite us. We opened their office over there. Then we decided that we should go into a more international, broad range. We opened an office in Madrid. The decision for Madrid is very easy. Getting into a far away is, well, what is the easier one? In that sense, after we took the decision of starting in the hardest one, that is Silicon Valley. If you succeed here, you can succeed everywhere in the world. We took a chance there to go into a different approach and open in Madrid. That was the easier part in Europe to open an office. And the last two offices was open in Michigan. Everybody say, what are you doing in Michigan? Well, that's interesting. The car industry is in a very, very critical time. Mexico has a very high participation. We produce a lot of cars in Mexico, and that is going to be quite of a very interesting challenge. How is going to be recovering the car industry? But Mexico is going to be part of that, much more active in that sense. And the latest office that we opened is in Phoenix, that was opened this year. The program announced every year we open 2 new offices. This year, still been 2 more to go. It's not yet defined. It's going to be at the very end of the year, and that is going to be under the President Calderon policies to keep going that for at least for the next 3 years more. I hope it's going to be for a long, long time. And how we work in that direction? In that direction, we work into a way that is TechBA. When we have offices all around the world with different people, learning how is developed the entrepreneur environment, we call the TechBA ecosystem. That is, we work in Mexico. We are creating something that we call innovation spaces. We have a network in Mexico. Last year we did events in more than 30 cities, and this year we are reaching about the same amount at the end of the year. And the idea is we get together people from universities, students, professors, academics. We get people from the industry, we get people from the enterprise, and we get the governments in each of the cities and work together in how to develop companies. That's the subject that we are facing. And we have a local operation. We create a program that is an awareness program that is very interesting. We call pre-acceleration. We bring companies into the US for a week. We teach them how to do business. We say how the different environment in each place is different. And then these companies has a transformation that create products that are for the global market. And the focus is how we adapt or create new products and get into the global market. And here's a tremendous opportunity, and we're really looking how to spread that word into everybody. We want to do that not alone us, our companies. Here today are 3 companies, Margarita, Jose Antonio, and Jose are 3 companies that are from Mexico, and they are seeking to learn, invite people, make alliance, develop new possibilities, and that thing we are doing everywhere that we go. So we want to, these companies learn how to do a global company, have the capabilities. These companies, well, Margarita is about 2,300 people working in a call center. Jose Antonio has a software development environment to support the products, and it's a 50-people company. And Jose's Mech is really a startup that is starting with the new alternatives of payments online. Then is going to be sometime announced how it's happening. He's still been a little bit in the development process. The range of the companies are from very small companies to any kind of companies in any sector that could be not just technology. Could be companies in any other areas. Example that has been In that sense, for instance, JackBee, and maybe you know that, JackBee is a company, is maybe the most known company that has started for Luis Derechin, a guy that was in Mexico, got some little venture capital, moved the company into Washington, D.C., and he's doing a lot of mashup software. He has a development office in Fremont, but the base of the company is Mexico City. They already are in the, already got the third round of investment. In that sense, is our hope that maybe is one of the very first IPO companies. Then InfoLink is Jose Antonio, is a product support environment capability. When the typical thing that companies here in the Valley are doing a product, they start to put the product on the market, and happens to be that the engineering people is doing the support of the company, and you get into a problem that you don't get more development because the people is taking care of the support. The support people is not very good because engineers are not good to doing the full support. They want to do the new product development. And that sense is a very critical stage, and the value proposition that InfoLink is bringing into the table is how to do that process easier, faster, and in a very good way. Sinaloa Seafields is a very interesting company. I really recommend that you visit the website. It's a company that is producing algae into a captive environment. In the US, there is not algae produced for any way in fresh form. Anything is bringing from India, China, or Japan. If you are eating sushi, the sushi cover is algae. But now, one of the interesting things is they are introducing new kind of products, not only for be used for the sushi wrap, but is used for a complement to additive for food. And that is a very interesting area of opportunity. Maybe you are going to start seeing sometimes, that's a dream, on the lettuce, spinach, and algae for doing salads. Why not? That's some of the ideas. Next Contact is Margarita, is a company that is focused in customer support, customer care, and they are doing very well. 2,300 people are working with them. eBills is the company from Jose Smek, and in that sense, it's a very interesting startup company. And Oval Path, that is another company that is a complement to be used with things like styles of Facebook, Orkut, social networking, in how to produce content for social networks location-based. And that's a very interesting. It's a company that is almost ready, almost close to sign the first angel investment. The company already has some product, and we hope to announce very soon. In that sense, I want to invite you really how you can go and find a way to work. I invite you to go to our website. I'm going to show you that later. Talk to the companies. Find how you can be a mentor for a company. It's a fantastic experience. I can tell you, when you're working into an organization, you have a very high creativity, but doing a product within a very large organization is a completely different beast than doing that by your own, with a new company that do not have the resources and things like that. In that sense, I invite you in the TechBA website. You can see the portfolio of the current 41 companies that are active with us. We are really working very strongly with a lot of companies. The portfolio, the full portfolio of the companies that has gone for the full TechBA process is more than 450, and 231 of them has gone through our office here in the Silicon Valley. We are located in San Jose, nearby the airport, 1 block from there. That is very convenient. But today, the world is flat, the communication is completely available, Google Talk can reach any place, and that's the way that we're seeking how to do things. I appreciate your time. I don't know if you have questions or you want to talk with the companies. Thank you very much.
Mr. Zavala, thank you very much for coming. This was very interesting. I got one question, and do you know of any models like this in other countries or Asia, or continents that are doing the same thing that you guys are doing? And, if you can elaborate a little bit of the success of the program, because I'm seeing that you are opening new offices, and there's clearly success. But if you can elaborate on what happened with the companies that started with you the first year, where they are now, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And that's a very interesting. First and all, the question is how is done that all around the world? There are different organizations. You can see here in the Valley, there is the ANSA organization that is bringing companies from Australia. There is a Silicon French that is bringing companies from France. There is Jetro has an office that is helping companies from Japan. The Taiwanese, the Korean people has different ways. We found so far that we are the only ones that we have a complete full scheme that goes from the original place in Mexico to how to reach that company's success globally. And that is a unique model. In some way, I am glad that a lot of these governments comes to us, or private organizations come to us to ask how we do, and we're very open. We share that, we discuss that, about that, how the process is done. And we found that most of the kind of activities that are a very traditional incubation is we provide you a space, we have a couple of events a year, and we provide some kind of introductions, but not into a very well structured. Now we are doing a lot of very different things. We do awareness programs, we provide, we are creating, in fact, companies. Part of the companies in the portfolio now has been spin-offs that provide services in how to manage telecommunications for companies, how to do lead generations worldwide, how to do market research for these kind of companies. There are services that are happening all around our ecosystem. Right now, when you have 500 companies in the portfolio and growing 200 every year, that gave you really a critical mass to be creating an ecosystem. And I don't see right now a similar model. I imagine that soon we're going to start looking about that. Organizations like Plug and Play, currently, for instance, Whiteboard Strategies is an organization that are bringing people from Europe with models that are not exactly in the same way. They are more focusing how to bring in the companies into the venture capitalists, not provide the underneath support. We provide the full level. And that is something that we're very pleased to learn, and we learn in a different modes with the different environments. The success, that's a very good question that I love to receive every time that we present the program. We have different ways of take measurements of these things. At the beginning, we would like to see that each company that comes with us got into a venture investment and go into an IPO. That's still been something that we are seeking very much. Currently, from the 41 companies that we are working this year, 5 of them are seeking for venture investment. But not all of them are seeking for that. And why that happens? Well, we're covering the full spectrum of companies. The worst case scenario that happens is from the 231 companies that has gone with us. So far, I found that just 3 of them has gone out of business. That's really 1 in 100 is not bad. The rest of these companies, maybe about 30% or something like that, decide to retire and work in Mexico, make a much more robust company, and then come back later on. And that is maybe one of the very interesting cases. Most of that companies at least double their sales in the first year, at least. There are companies that has gone to 5 times, not all of them. But, and that is a very interesting thing. That they do a lot of much more business using just the knowledge they got from being for a 4-month period in the US. They go back to Mexico and they double the sales. That's not bad. Now, the next step is, for instance, companies that are with us is we have companies that has gone into the venture investment. We have about 4 or 5 companies. That is a very interesting, it's a mindset change that has gone through the Mexican companies. Typical companies or Latin American people don't like to have co-owners of the company, and they want to have their own companies. When you bring an investor, the investor say, oh, I want to have a very important part of your company. And that is a mindset that has been learned. Now, every day, we're receiving more companies that are seeking specifically that approach. And that is going to be a trend that I can see in the future. That is going to be the majority of the companies. But that was a transformation stage of the program. From the next stage is, from that companies, from the 231 companies that has gone here, we keep about half of them doing business in the US. And that, some of them do the business from Mexico. They open a branch in the US, they have a commercial office with one person that is really a representative, and usually is the accounting people. And with this marvelous world that you can move back and forth with Mexico, is you can go to Mexico, from Mexico to here, almost any place in the US in less than 2 days. That's, in fact, doing my benchmark is, my shortest trip has been 23 hours. To be in Mexico, give conference, have meetings with people, and coming back in 23 hours. That's the shortest period of time that I have been able to do it. And that's, when you want to go that to other places, to India, to China, to the Philippines, you spend 4 days or 5 days at least in traveling. And don't say when you get there with the change of schedule is you are complete burnt out. In Mexico, you are about the same time schedule. Now, last year we saw with these companies, new sales outside of Mexico was $54 million for the companies that we have here in the 231 companies. And this year we're expecting that we may reach into, the expectations we're in the neighborhood of $200 million with the companies in the full ecosystem. And that is really very good. If you are taking companies and for the first year doing business outside of the current environment they were working, generate 54 millions, really is a very good kind of things. The target or the dream of each company is try to do a sales capability of $1 million for a person that they have in the new location. And usually they have 1 or 2 persons in the new location. That means the target of expanding is to go for 2 millions at the end of the very first year. Some other question? Yep. Well, it's good for the recording because it's going to be on YouTube or.
Oh, okay. So out of the 200 million that are projected for this year, I guess, how's the distribution in terms of the types of markets? Is it mostly technology companies, or is it a mix between, I don't know, agriculture and other type of services?
Okay. Yep. Yeah. From the portfolio, I can tell you today, from the 41 companies that we have here in the Valley, is 9 call centers and business process outsourcing companies, 19 companies that are software related, 2 companies in the food industry, 1 company in marketing, and about 7 or 8, the rest of the companies are doing into mechanical and optics devices and medical devices. And in that sense, the amount of money really that we are getting is services are very high. Software products are getting into some kind of about 10-20% is ramp out, and a lot of these companies, really the startup is going to be not a very high amount of money, but a lot of customer acquisition because they are moving a lot into the software as a service approach. And at the beginning, the customer acquisition is going to be the toughest part because it's more important to get customers than they paid for that amount. And that's some kind. But for instance, one of the companies in the portfolio is now today recognized as the only supplier or RFID tools locator for the Air Force in the US. That's amazing. Is tools within the Air Force camps. It's very critical to know where they are. Can you imagine a screwdriver that is missing and left into one part of the motors when they do maintenance or things like that? And they create a system that by RFID locate all the tools in order to avoid any kind of mistakes and things like that. And that is a very high potential volume of sales that are going to be doing. We have another company that needs a classified project, but they are into the security environment, and they have a very large project right now in one of the states in the US. We have another companies that are into education. They are providing educational materials for K-12, and that's getting quite well. And in that sense, most of the companies, I can say 80% or 90% of the company production is very high-tech level. Okay, well, thank you very much.